Good morning, Salome B here, and we're going to talk about Venezuela migrant crisis. Peru tightens border controls. Peru has brought into force new entry requirements to control the numbers of Venezuelan migrants. Venezuelans will no longer be admitted with just an identity card. Although children, pregnant women, and the elderly are exempted, similar rules were introduced in Ecuador last week only to be overturned by a court. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans are fleeing their country amid chronic shortages of food and medicine. The country's long-standing economic crisis has seen more than 2 million citizens leave since 2014, causing regional tensions as neighboring countries struggle to accommodate them. The UN is setting up a special team to coordinate the regional response. However, the UN Migration Agency has warned that the continent faces a refugee crisis moment similar to that seen in the Mediterranean in 2015. What is happening in Peru? The authorities in Lima set a deadline of midnight on Friday for the new passport rules to come into force. Many Venezuelans have been looking to start a new life in Peru, which has one of the region's fastest growing economies, traveling there via Colombia and Ecuador. On Friday, there was a rush of people heading to the Peruvian border, and Ecuador created a humanitarian corridor by laying on buses to take migrants through the country. Peruvian Prime Minister Cesar Villanueva said requiring Venezuelans to show their passport at the border did not mean that Peru was closing the door to migrants. He said ID cards did not provide enough information and could easily be forged. Routes of Venezuelan migrants: Mexico, U.S., Costa Rica, Colombia, Calcutta, Venezuela, Bovista, Manosa, Brazil, Peru, Lima, Ecuador, Cuyo, Chile, Argentina. On Friday, more than 2,500 crossed into the small Peruvian border town of Agasa Verdes, with 1,000 more trying to reach Peru at the main crossing point at Tums. Many were exhausted by the journey. We have been on the road for 5 days. We've traveled by bus, saw people, Venezuelans, walking along the roads. Jonathan Zabrabro, 18, told AFP news agency the Tums crossing has seen about 3,000 arrivals per day in recent weeks. Peru is already home to about 400,000 Venezuelan migrants, most of whom arrived in the past year. The UN says Joe Millman, a spokesman for the International Organization for Migrants, IOM, a UN agency, said increasing border restrictions coupled with an outbreak of violence on the Brazilian border last week was an early warning sign that the region was in need of help. This is building to a crisis moment we've seen in other parts of the world, particularly in the Mediterranean. He told reporters a difficult situation can become a crisis situation very quickly, and we have to be prepared, he added. Shashara Cardoletti of the UN Refugee Agency said other countries in the region had welcomed Venezuelans and were helping to avoid a situation like the one we have seen in Europe. What are we seeing is a content that has opened its doors to people who are fleeing and who need support. Ms. Cadola added that Colombia had registered more than 450,000 Venezuelans and given them regular status. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is to set up a special UN team to coordinate a regional response to the crisis, while Ecuador is to host a 13-nation regional summit in September. How are the countries affected? Ecuador brought a new passport regulations last week, leaving hundreds of migrants stranded on its border with Colombia. However, on Friday, a judge found that requiring Venezuelans to carry valid passport broke regional agreements on freedom of. However, on Friday, a judge found that requiring Venezuelans to carry valid passports broke regional agreement on freedom of movement. Now, Katie Watson says this is an immigration coup to get into Peru. From midnight, they won't let Venezuelans through if they don't have passport. Less than half an hour left. Immigration officials expect lots of angry people who can't get stamped in time. More than 500,000 Venezuelans have crossed into Ecuador this year alone, and more than 1 million have entered Colombia in the past 15 months. Brazil's northern state of Roraima has also had its attempt to close the border with Venezuela thrown out by a judge. Violence erupted in the border town of Pacaramara last week when local residents attacked makeshift camps housing Venezuelan migrants. The camps were burned down and the occupants temporarily fled back across the border. Despite the violence, the number of Venezuelans crossing daily into Brazil has continued to rise. What has Venezuela said? The government took drastic measures to stabilize the economy last week, issuing new banknotes that slashed 5 zeros off the Bolivar. Runaway inflation had been predicted to hit 1,000,000% by the end of the year. On Friday, Venezuela Information Minister George Rodriguez said the measures would persuade those Venezuelans who had left to return. The conclusion is that the Venezuelans are going to return, and furthermore, we invite them to return because we need them for this recovery plan, he told a news conference. Economists have warned that the new measures do not address the root cause of inflation in Venezuela, and that the printing of new notes could accelerate inflation rather than curb it. So what we have right now is an economic crisis in Venezuela and Brazil, and people are fleeing. Just like the Mexicans were fleeing here to the United States, there is an economic crisis in Mexico and Venezuela. So that's why border policy is being reformed and renewed here in the United States. And Brazil has just now canceled all kinds of IDs and things like that. If it doesn't have enough information on it, they canceled it, and they have a new passport law. So people are becoming refugees. And this is a situation that the UN has to handle, because now you have refugees, and refugees are basically wandering homeless people who don't have anywhere to go. So let's keep talking about this. Like, share, subscribe. Salome B. Have a great day.